So I chose to write about the progressive education constructionism model for my research share, but I specifically wanted to focus on the Reggio Emilia approach. I knew virtually nothing about this topic, so that's why I chose to use it as a resource share. From the text in Meant to Learn, I learned that the progressive education was a movement that grew in popularity during the 1960s and 1970s. And this philosophy of education was built on connecting the classroom with the real world and kind of moving away from the idea of separating students into grades based on age. There was an emphasis on project based learning and teaching based on students' interest as an individual rather than as a whole group. So the Reggio Emilia approach was created in Italy in the town with the namesake Reggio Emilia. And after World War II, they focused on major changes to their educational approach, and they drew heavily on the theories, philosophy, and works of Vygotsky, Dewey, and Piaget. And so they created this school curriculum and lessons that were centered on the interests and ideas of the children at the school rather than mandates from teachers or government or any other outside influences. After the parent and after the teacher, they believed that the learning environment was the quote unquote third teacher. So the school gave students tools in order to tinker and to create in order to solve problems and answer questions of interest to them as individuals. The teacher created lessons and curriculum based on what they heard from the students and what they wanted to learn. I learned immense amount from researching into this. It was one of the first real examples of a school that has been using a constructionism model for over 50 years. And it's a great social experiment to see how this approach is effective and ineffective. I knew nothing about the Reggio Emilia approach or the progressive education model until researching into this research share. I think this theory ties really well with the maker movement, and the maker movement is built on student interest, socialization, technology use, and the mentorship from both peers and teachers. And it's really consistent with the Reggio Emilia approach and the idea that the environment is that third teacher. Students are able to explore and tinker all while collaborating and socializing with their peers to learn from each other. There's an opportunity with the maker movement, just like the Reggio Emilia approach, to use the environment to learn just as much as using the teacher to learn. They're both real examples of moving away from the teacher-centered focus of learning to more student-centered focused learning. And when comparing the maker movement and the Reggio Emilia approach, there's an obvious connection. They both allow students to tinker, explore, and create using their hands, technology, and tools. But there's a subtler but extremely important connection that I think gets to the heart of these movements, the idea of community building and communication, both really important skills. Both in the Reggio Emilia approach and the maker movement, children are a space where they're interacting with classmates, reflecting, they're chatting, they're observing, and they're listening to others. And the Reggio Emilia approach is extremely different from current school systems, theories of learning, and mandates from the Department of Education. The role of the actual teacher is to listen to the children and create curricular activities and lesson plans around what interests them, rather than using standardized curriculum, tests, and lessons to teach every child the same exact thing. Additionally, this approach to learning, both in the makerspace and with the Reggio Emilia model, is different from traditional approaches because they focus on authentic learning and teaching, where students learn as they explore rather than listening to lectures and memorizing information. Lastly, the progressive education constructionism theory and the Reggio Emilia approach also relate to Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory that all people learn in different ways. And these models really can reach students who may have more challenges in a more traditional classroom. You learn by doing rather than just listening and taking notes. So I hope you found this resource share interesting. I would definitely check out the articles down below. And one last thought is, I shared it earlier in one of my discussion posts, but there was a BBC video actually recently. I didn't reference it here in my my resource share, but I'm going to include the link down below, and I recommend you check it out because it's really an interesting how Silicon Valley parents are now moving towards having their children grow up with this kind of theory and model in mind, and they're getting away from their children using technology exclusively, but learning through creating and working and touching and using tools and tinkering. So it's a pretty interesting video to check out. Hope you found this helpful. Thank you.